Do you take OPcache for granted? You might be in the camp of 90% of people that do not check if their OPcache configuration settings are sized for their application. Even though OPcache is enabled since PHP 5.5, that does not mean that it's configured correctly. You can't just enable it and assume that everything is going to be alright. Take this customer, for example. They didn't size OPcache correctly and lost 20% in performance because of this mistake. When they corrected it, compile times and autoloading times dropped significantly, giving them a 20% improvement in performance from 1.6 seconds to 1.3 seconds in the 95th percentile. That is really great for just setting a few values, configuration values differently. What are the important OPcache settings that you need to look into? There are 3 settings that are the most important ones to configure. The first one is called OPcache memory consumption. Its default is 128 megabytes. Then there is OPcache max accelerated files, which is defaulting to 10,000 files. And third, there's OPcache intern strings buffer, which defaults to 8 megabyte. So what are the right values for these settings? You can check in PHP info output. Under the Send OPcache section, you'll find a few statistics that give you a lot of information that you can make the right decision on these settings. For the OPcache memory consumption setting, you need to look at 2 configuration values, used memory and free memory. When the free memory statistic is going towards 0, then the used memory is going towards the, let's say, 128 megabytes. And in that case, it's an indicator that you need to increase the memory. For modern PHP applications, 128 could be too small. It might be necessary to increase it to 192 or 256 memory, for example, megabytes. The second setting is OPcache max accelerated files, and the default of 10,000 is really too small for applications such as Shopware, Laravel, Symfony or Magento 2. The reason for this is that they are using PHP files for caching. And once a lot of these cache files are generated, this means that in addition to the third-party libraries that are loaded through Composer, you quickly get to 10,000 files, and then no additional files will be stored into OPcache, even though the memory consumption might potentially allow it. This means that only a few scripts are compiled over and over again in every request, causing, let's say, the 20% drop that you saw for this customer before. To check if you are next to this limit, you need to look at the 2 values cached keys and max keys. Why are they not called cached files and max files? The reason for this is that OPcache internally translates the max accelerated files to the nearest prime number. So for the default of 10,000, you get 16,229 keys. And these are filled with PHP files. If the cached keys value comes close to the max keys, that means that you're at the maximum and should increase the value. I don't see a problem by increasing this configuration setting tenfold. It doesn't have any limitations to do that. And the OPcache memory consumption is already an upper bound for how much stuff is going to be stored in OPcache. The third setting that you need to look at is the intern strings buffer. Intern strings are things like class names, function names, variable names, and literal strings that are inside your PHP scripts. All these can be shared in memory and used across all the different parallel processes that run PHP, for example in Apache or PHP FPM. If you don't set this setting high enough, then every request needs to reallocate the same memory for a string that is used across different scripts and processes. And that is very wasteful. The default value of 8 megabytes is really too small for modern applications again, and you should always set it to the highest possible value of 32 megabytes. And then you usually don't run into problems anymore. So how do you access these variables in your production setup? Sometimes it's not that easy to get at the PHP info output. And you really need to look at it from the web server side, because looking at the Xent OPcache statistics from the command line accesses a different OPcache, and the values from there cannot be used to evaluate how OPcache is performing on the web server. So there are a few tools available that allow you to extract this information into a metrics tool. You can build this yourself with Prometheus, for example, and gather this data in any kind of metric store that you are already using. Or you can use a tool like Tideways, who collects this information across all application servers, aggregates it, and alerts on it when, for example, OPcache is running low on memory, OPcache is running low on cache keys, or OPcache is running low on intern strings memory. You can also read up on this on our blog at tideways.com, which has all the information about setting the correct values for OPcache. You can find the link by clicking here.